So I'm already in the line at Dunkin' Donuts, and these thoughts are coming in my head like, "Oh, there's things are just hopeless. Like, there's absolutely I see no future." Um, and then this thought popped in my head of, you know, I should just like end it. And I was like, "What?" Like that is absolutely not me, not something I would ordinarily think, not true. And I was able to recognize in that moment, oh,
Scary.
this has gotten above.
Consider yourself hugged. We are Tammy and Michelle, and your weekly hug starts right now. Okay, welcome everyone. How are you?
I am glad it's the weekend, but good, good.
You know what's funny is I thought you were going to say I'm good, and I was going to say Michelle and I always talk for a minute before we start, and it's been a little challenging for both of us. But
Yes, yeah.
I'm glad it's the weekend too. So yeah, and we decided, trying to get this microphone thing to work. We decided because October the 10th is World Mental Health Day that we wanted to do 2 episodes. Um, this one, Michelle is going to lead us through. We're going to talk about mental health, like diagnoses, and then next week we're going to talk about resources. So, yeah. Oh, we wanted to do
Oh,
cheers. Okay, wait. So maybe we should both go toward our middle. Okay, let's see if this will be the most. Okay, so is it showing? All right, so cheers. I don't know how this is going to look in the video.
yeah.
And
No
it's,
idea. No idea.
I just have water. What do you have?
Water.
Really?
Yes.
Is that to support me?
Yes. Actually, I've just already drank coffee, so I'm not no, no. But I am supporting you. Yes, yes, for sure.
Well, and before we jump into the heavy stuff too, I mean, it is now, when you all are watching this, we are like full on October, which is full on pumpkin spice. And so this is going to be the hardest time for me with the Invisalign because I just want to have like pumpkin spice lattes and I have to like plan that. I can't just say, oh, let's pull into Starbucks and I love pumpkin. Okay. Are we ready to jump in and talk about diagnoses?
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about mental health awareness. I think that I love the fact that October is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think that being able to talk about mental health and talk about how much compassion, how important compassion is when it comes to that is one of my favorite topics. So, yes, I'm very excited. I'm wearing my Don't Fight Alone hoodie that came from a friend of mine's fundraiser. And this is, of course, in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month.
Wow. Are you going to, is there something more we need to know about that or do you want to put information in the show notes?
In terms of, I will definitely put, we can definitely put a wink, a wink.
A wink.
We can definitely put a link in the show notes to the page, but the Don't Fight Alone just comes from the fact that so many people are trying to like manage, struggle, not reach out when they're struggling. And so it's just kind of a reminder that we want to be there for one another.
Well, and that is a really good, not transition, but for next week's episode to talk about getting help.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes.
And so today, what we're going to talk about are just some of the more common diagnoses. We're going to talk about depression, anxiety in more detail, and then we'll talk about a few others. But just what does that look like? And how can you, if you have a family member or a friend or a loved one struggling, what's important to know about those things? And so we're going to start out talking about depression. And I think what's tricky about these diagnoses is that when you use the word depression, when you use the word anxiety, there is such a broad spectrum of what
Mm.
people are talking about. So they could be talking about all the way from, I'm depressed because of a difficult situation that's going on to the clinical biological
Mhm.
aspect of depression. And I think as friends, loved ones, like showing compassion regardless of where that
Mm.
person is on the spectrum. Because I think that depending on frame of reference, kind of what we have been taught growing up, what we have been taught even in adulthood, sometimes we can have a preconceived notion of how it's best to help someone.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
And
true. Because we all
and
have a lens through which our experiences and
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so I know that, like, if you think of like some generations, because it can be generational as well, some generations really do feel like with depression, anxiety, kind of there's that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
yeah,
And then, there are also kind of schools of thought that, well, you could just overcome it. You can think your way out of it. You can XYZ. And the reality is that so much of that is dependent on what's going on in regards to like the depression, the anxiety. And so there is a component of depression. There is a place on that spectrum for a biological component as well for depression, anxiety, and all that, the mental health diagnoses. And I think trying to understand that because someone is sad because difficult things are going on and you were able to overcome it. You were able to do different things day to day life that improved your mood. That's not necessarily the same or won't work the same for someone with like clinical depression who, regardless what they do, still have that sad,
right.
hopeless, you know, feeling that comes along with that. That feeling that when you wake up in the morning, it's difficult to get out of bed.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what we're talking about today from the compassion standpoint is just to kind of understand that, you know, we don't know what it's like to live in somebody else's shoes. We don't.
No, we do not. And I think this story it bears worth repeating as you start to talk about anxiety and depression is like when you just said, um, someone who is really struggling with clinical depression and can't get out of bed in the morning, and you asked me, how those things happen sometimes, I was like, "No, that never happens to me."
Right.
And
Right.
then when I asked you, how when you're worrying and then you forget what you were worrying about and then you worry about that and you were like, "No." So you can't know what it's like to walk in someone
No,
else's shoes.
absolutely not. And even like when you are aware, because one of the things we were talking about in that conversation that you mentioned, our previous conversation is like I waited longer than I think I should have to address my depressive symptoms. And it was one of those things where I had always envisioned because depression runs in my family and I've seen what severe depression looks like. And so I always pictured, okay, if I'm not getting out of bed, if I am not functioning, if I'm not going to work, then that's to the degree to where I need to address it. And the reality is, particularly when my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer and I was going through all of that, it really had gotten to a point where I was struggling and struggling way more than I should have been,
Yeah.
knowing that if you look at like 23andMe, my sister's results from that 76 out of 100 people in our family are diagnosed with
Right.
depression when you look at the genetics, right? And so,
And I mean, if I can interject too, and this, research doesn't always come top of mind when you're struggling with mental health challenges. You're not going to talk to yourself probably in the moment about research, but the earlier that you seek help for mental health challenges, I keep using this word easier, but your journey could be a little shorter, a little easier instead of waiting until because you talked about basically waiting until you were just like a pile of goo,
right. And,
and
and so,
that's when you would get help.
and it's really the same. as physical health, we just don't think about it that way. Like if we let something get to ICU status, then absolutely the recovery is going to be harder, longer than if we pay attention to that in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And
So,
I think with that is something with mental
mm,
health that oftentimes people will wait till it's emergency room level before they decide to seek help.
yes. And that is a whole nother, ER visits for mental health. We have stories of other people for that. But
Mhm.
yeah. So, and everybody, if Michelle, her primary challenge of her life has been depression and mine has been anxiety. So we complement each other very well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like being able to manage depression symptoms, even if it runs in your family with different things like exercise, therapy, diet. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we're saying is if it reaches a level, well, more of that is needed, that there's absolutely no shame or stigma in that. And what I find is that sometimes if someone has had one version of depression and then their friend is struggling with a different version of depression, we so much want to help that we give advice like, oh, you shouldn't do that, you should do this because I did this. And
Yep.
we've talked a little bit too about like the mental health and the church aspect of things, and how sometimes, like with the best intentions, we can forget that for some people there is definitely a component that is not going to change
Yep.
regardless of what they do, because it is a biological
Right.
component that's going on.
And, next week when we talk about resources, I hope we'll be able to give you all like, it is not just, again, it's not, hopefully you won't wait until it's crisis. And there's so many things early on to do that, I mean, there's just so many ways to help your mental health, self help included, but there's just so much. And we're going to share all of that with you next week.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's we mentioned lifestyle changes, therapy, medication. There is no um shame that should be related to that if that is a part of your treatment regimen.
Right.
And we don't always support each other in that, I think. And so with depression, when you're talking about clinical depression, I want to talk a little bit about some of the symptoms of that. With that could be just hopelessness, this feeling of like severe hopelessness, this feeling that things will never get better, severe lack of motivation, energy, feeling like you have 1,000 pounds weighing you down and you have to move that anytime that you are working to accomplish anything.
Yeah. Are you going to, Michelle, will we be putting some information in the show notes about the different mental health diagnoses, symptoms, signs, all that kind of stuff?
Yes, yeah, and we want to definitely mention here that it's more for like a reference. We aren't asking you to diagnose your family member or diagnose
Mm-mm.
yourself, just to kind of see like, oh, I am having these feelings of hopelessness and no matter what, I can't really shake it. Like that is actually could definitely be a component of clinical depression.
And it was profound for me. And I hope you're hearing what Michelle says, that you might think that's normal, like, and I hate to use the word normal, but that typical, that everybody does that. And so when you discover, oh, everybody doesn't do that and I could get help for this, it's very empowering.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I want to mention that it is a process. And so, even when someone does start getting help, they still need your support.
Mhm.
Like, it is a recovery process, just like the recovery process of, if you think about it, in the same as like a physical illness or
Yes.
component or something chronic physically. It's the same. And so being there, supporting one another, loving one another through it is important. It's important not to feel like you're alone in
Yes.
this.
Yes, that's huge. So, depression, and we'll put information there. Um, we'll put some websites and all kinds of things for, again, like Michelle said, we always put a disclaimer like on the podcast show notes and YouTube and places, but it bears saying out loud here. This is not supposed to be a diagnostic. This is just informational.
Yeah, absolutely. And so,
Yeah.
kind of talking about anxiety, multiple types of anxiety. There's generalized anxiety, social anxiety, um, and we really aren't talking about worrying when there's something that anyone would worry about. We're talking about worrying about it excessively. We're talking about how much space does it occupy in your
Mm.
day? How much does it interfere with day-to-day life? And that's kind of a component when you're talking about a diagnosis versus um, something that is common to day-to-day life. We're talking about things that interfere with day-to-day life. And so with generalized anxiety, that is kind of just a constant base of worry where you're worried about random things that you think may never even happen. But
And typically don't.
yes, yeah, but still, it isn't something someone can just turn off when when it's clinical. Like it's not something I know that so many people it's difficult for them to understand. Well, why are you worrying about that? Just stop worrying about that.
So
And
you're saying
yeah,
that's not helpful?
it's not helpful. It's not
Just
helpful.
telling someone not to worry about it is not helpful?
It
Wow.
is, it's not. And, you know, I think it's wonderful if you want to share something that's been helpful for you, but also to understand that that may not be helpful for that person and that they may need different interventions.
Yes. So what should people look for then for what is not typical anxiety?
How
But
much of
how
how
much of
much
your
of
day?
your day is that occupying? How distressing is it to you? Like, is it keeping you from different things day to day life wise? Is it keeping you from enjoying
Yeah.
your life? That's the
Because
component.
cuz you're right, like it might keep you from showing up, and also you might show up but it's still there. So people might be showing up but inside is the spiral that
Yeah,
you may not know is happening.
absolutely. And you know, that is across the board. Social anxiety as well. Social anxiety is kind of that anxiety that something embarrassing is going to happen. I'm not going to be able to think of what to say. People might be thinking negatively about me. And I think a lot of people have that a little, but at the same time, from a clinical perspective, we're talking about things that are really debilitating, that really keep you from interacting in day to day life or being a part or participating in things. That definitely is a component of social anxiety.
I remember this isn't social anxiety, but when you think about the things that someone with anxiety disorder worries about, I remember going to the senior prom and we walked in and I mean, I was raised poor. I didn't know like social expectations and I walked in and all of the guys had on boutonnieres and I didn't get a boutonniere for my date and it ruined the whole night. The whole night. That's all I could think about was what were people thinking? Was he going to be embarrassed? Did he think I was an idiot? What were people going to think about me? How was I so stupid? How could I not buy a boot? It ruined the whole night.
And it's, you would think someone saying, "Oh, that's not no one's thinking about that." It doesn't
Doesn't work.
change the circuitry. No, it doesn't. And I have told this story before. We've talked about it, like my donut story. Like the moment I realized, oh,
Yes.
I have I started back into therapy when my dad was diagnosed because I've talked before about the fact that the sudden loss of my brother, the sudden loss of my mother, I sort of had a fear of grief because it was an emotion that was so large. that I
Yeah.
couldn't shove it aside. I couldn't bury it. It was something I had to walk through. And so knowing, okay, this time I have a heads up, this is coming. I'm going to get into therapy. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to control this thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I
Your
was in,
your
yes,
logical
yeah,
brain.
I can do this. This is going to
That's
be
still
better this time.
it's still good though that I mean, that you got back into therapy.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah,
good. You know.
absolutely. So like I started in therapy, and things just day to day life were bothering me way more than they should. And I definitely could have linked it to, oh, it's because of what's going on with my dad. But at the same time, I was sitting in the line at Dunkin' Donuts, and generally, I mean, obviously, we've talked, I love sweets, but
That should be a
try to
happy
be,
place.
yes, yeah, and trying to be pretty, I try to be pretty healthy. So I'm already in the line at Dunkin' Donuts. And these thoughts are coming in my head like, oh, there's things are just hopeless. Like there's absolutely, I see no future. Um, and then this thought popped in my head of, you know, I should just like end it. And I was like, what? Like that is absolutely not me, not something I would ordinarily think, not true. And I was able to recognize in that moment, oh,
Scary.
this has gotten above what the situation I had thought. Like this is not just about my dad. This is depression.
Deeper. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it was like maybe it worsened due to the situation, but that's not where that was. That was coming from the depression that I knew ran in my family that is just,
Yeah.
there. And so I did start medication after that, and it like in the time frame the medication worked, it went away. And I felt
Wow.
so much better. And it was like, I can't believe I didn't do this earlier.
Well, and there's all the reasons, right? Sometimes just not knowing, not not thinking through the stigma, the just I can be strong.
We just get sidetracked.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
think it's
that's what I meant.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, that you don't think about it. You're like,
Hmm.
it'll be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And
So
just to mention, like, I never would have acted on that, by the way, I'll say that. But like the thought popping in my head was what made me aware that this
yeah.
is not the thing.
And you know that there are different levels of suicidal thoughts. I had them in the psych hospital. It was in my medical records that I said if this was my
Hmm.
life now, I didn't want to live. But I don't really think I ever would have. I don't remember a time when I had a plan or really thought that through. So there's different levels, but the thought at all is still
It's
deserves
a warning
attention.
sign. Yeah, you
Mhm.
need it's something to pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely. So depression, anxiety, what else are we talking about?
So just to mention a couple other things and just to be aware, mental health awareness of the vocabulary we use around them, like OCD, bipolar disorder. OCD is very distressing to individuals who struggle with it clinically. It is a combination or one or the other of intrusive thoughts that are oftentimes not something someone would ordinarily think and can be really uncomfortable for that person. And then sometimes compulsions that go along with it to try to quiet those thoughts. And it is a term that we throw around a lot, like, oh, I'm just
Ugh.
OCD and
Ugh.
like I'm a perfectionist and I want everything perfect. And, or like with the term bipolar disorder, I think that oftentimes that has become associated with mood ups and downs
It,
when, yeah, when that it clinically is not what a diagnosis of bipolar, that's not the criterion for a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So I think that being kind, respectful, understanding that we want to be there to support one another, but not to make anything worse for anybody. We're not trying to fix anybody, but at the same time, we can be there to stand and support with compassion and without judgment. We don't know, again, like what it's like to walk in that person's shoes.
Yeah, and I think, the language piece for me is so important. And I actually have, I'll put a picture of it in the show notes, but everybody who's been with me for a while has heard me talk about the ribbons that you get at conferences. Like you have a badge and then it'll have like attendee or chairperson or whatever. And I saw someone walk around with one that said OCD. I'm like, what? And people will ask me sometimes about, oh, come on. People are so sensitive. Why do we have to be so politically correct? Why does everybody get offended? Why can't we just say crazy? Why can't I say he's bipolar? Why can't, well, you can do whatever you want. And when people talk that way, it doesn't offend me for me. Like you and I think are both very comfortable talking about our mental health journeys.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say there's never any shame because I know during the pandemic when I didn't get help, part of it was a little bit of thinking, oh no, you know, so there's a little bit of that there, but mainly I'm not embarrassed to talk about it. So I'm not offended for me. Oh, and I know you and I've talked about this before. Every year for the past 3 years that I've lived in this neighborhood, no, 4, this is the 4th, this is Halloween month, and there's a house that always decorates. It says State Psychiatric Hospital. It's a cemetery. And then they have this way to the mental asylum. I'm not offended for me, but I do worry about that or saying, oh, so and so's bipolar for that person who's not comfortable or who, it just perpetuates the stigma. It keeps people from speaking up if they're already struggling. Why would they speak up in a workplace or somewhere where people are making fun? And that's where it gets ugly for me.
I think that I have told you this story before, but I'm not certain. Like in the building where like my private practice was that I shared with my two partners, there were probably, I mean, I don't even know how many therapists, but it was us, a lot of therapists in the building, some other businesses as well. But the I don't, it wasn't the owners. I'd say more like the administration of the building decorated for Halloween. And one of the decorations said something like that about like a insane asylum or something like that. Yeah, and we immediately, obviously me and one of the other therapists, we were like, no, I don't
No.
think this is gonna, because I worked there on the weekends, so I was there on the weekends to see it before everybody else, and I texted one of the therapists I knew and like, hey, did you see this? This is right down from our office. I sent her a picture, and she was like, and
Do
they
you
took it down.
do you still have that
Hmm.
picture?
I don't know. I'll have to look. But
I
again,
yeah.
like this person was not like in the mental health realm, like their business that they were a part of in the building had nothing to do with mental health. And I don't think they even didn't even occur to them.
Yeah.
And they did take it down immediately once we talked about that. But
Yeah, and people don't most of the time people don't mean to be hurtful, or when they realize that it might be hurtful, they care. I think the majority of people. But there are still a lot of people who are pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Mental health isn't real. People use it as a crutch. I can call someone bipolar if I want to, or,
yeah,
oh,
and
okay.
we would love, Tammy and I would love to hear from you. What things have happened? Has anything happened that are similar that you would want to share just as a learning experience for people? Like maybe the person didn't mean to be offensive to you or your family member, but it was. And so we would love to hear from you about some of your experiences as well.
You know what? Let's do this. If you have that picture, send it to me. I will put the one from the neighborhood. None of y'all know where I live, and I would not call the person out. It's way on the other side of my neighborhood. And then some of the memes and the picture of the OCD ribbon, anything, and you all just to talk about it. Like let's put memes, pictures, decorations, just things that make you think. And let's generate some conversation. Is that okay?
Yeah. Sounds great.
Yeah, I bet you anything in the I need to look through the ribbons. It's so funny because these ribbons that go, if you've ever been to a conference, not you, but you who are listening and watching, you can get the ribbons. Oftentimes they give them to you. Sometimes there's ribbon stations. Sometimes you buy them, like as a fundraiser. But I have ordered them before, and they're called fun packs, and they have all sorts of different things. But the last one I bought, I think it was a pack of 200. Probably 30 of them were alcohol related, and probably 20 of them were mental health related, and maybe another, I really don't know the exact number, but maybe at least half of them were negative, snarky, alcohol, mental health. And I bet you anything there's one in there about something about bipolar. I'm going to look.
I think that it's like an interesting conversation because I know it's supposed to be fun, right? But is it fun? Like if you participate in that,
I know, and I get it. You see someone else who has one that says I'm bipolar, and you're like, me too, or I'm OCD too. But it just perpetuates not only the stigma, but also if a person calls themselves OCD or bipolar, then that takes the thoughts that they're having. First of all, it's like you said, OCD and bipolar can be very painful disorders. They're disorders. They affect a person's daily life. Whereas just the fact that I want to have all my pens neatly in a cup, I, you know, unless that causes me pain or I go to bed and I can't stop thinking about it. But even calling yourself that indicates that you're living in this identity of suffering. So I don't think it's good either way.
I
Okay.
agree. I agree.
All right. Soapbox over. Okay.
All
Well,
right.
what do you think? Are we good?
Yes. So that's all I have for today, unless you have something else you want to talk about.
I don't. So we're talking this time, World Mental Health Day this month about diagnoses, that it's okay to get help. It's okay to have a diagnosis if that is going to help your journey healing. And then next week, we'll talk about some options in getting help. Everything from medically to phone numbers to hidden gems. We're going to talk about some hidden gems you may not know you have access to. So we're going to do that next week.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, then I'm trying to remember to ask everyone. Oh, our mug winner, by the way, from our initial one is Karen McCoy. So applause for Karen.
Yay.
Karen McCoy, you were someone who you commented, you signed up, you followed us on social media. And we mentioned, I think the episode has already dropped where we first mentioned, leave us a review. And the first, what we say, 5, I think?
Mm-hmm.
Reviews will get a mug. So the podcast is growing. I think I'm saying this multiple episodes, but it's growing in listenership and downloads. We want it to grow in engagement. We're here for you. So leave us a comment wherever you're listening, watching, social media, blog, any place. We just love to hear from you. And send us your memes and your pictures of the whole, mental health mockery. Okay. Well then, until we're together next time, consider yourself
hugged.
hugged. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Yay. Bye.